All right. And let's talk to an expert on Vance Joseph as a defensive coordinator, because I covered him here when he was a head coach. Little different these past 4 years, and we've got our guy, Bo Brack, coming to us from Arizona. He covers the Cardinals. He's been around Vance Joseph's tenure as a Cardinals defensive coordinator. Bo, you got a big smile on your face. Is it because you're happy for the Broncos getting Vance, or are you happy that Vance is no longer in Arizona?
Look, the Vance Joseph divorce happened last week for the Cardinals fans, so I think that celebration, it ended, subsided a little bit, so I'm not coming on with this crap-eating grin just because Vance Joseph got another gig back in Denver, which, I think we can all say that Vance Joseph is back having the time of his life, like he was on Monday Night Football those years back.
Oh, you're absolutely right, Bo. So you and Johnny, and really Johnny, have not been afraid to say how tough it's been for Vance Joseph being the defensive coordinator, specifically over this last year. Why is that? Why were people in Arizona so happy that he left when he did last week?
Obviously, the results, and VJ is somebody that is pretty straight up and transparent that he realized that the results weren't there, at least this past season, because I think you can look at 2021 and say, hey, Vance Joseph actually coached up a pretty solid defense. It was, sandwiched in between three pretty ineffective seasons at the defensive coordinator position. But I think the main reason for frustration from this Arizona Cardinals fan base, and Johnny and myself included, was Vance Joseph was so reluctant to play young players that when it came to very imperative seasons to figure out if players were going to get paid and you were going to sign them to multi-year contracts, you didn't know enough about them. You saw guys exit this franchise far too often because by year 4, usually if they were beyond first-round picks, you're like, well, should they kind of give them the bag? Should they sign them to a multi-year deal? Is it safe? Are they players now? Because Vance Joseph, first years usually for players, they're used sparingly. I mean, Vance Joseph was gifted 2 first-round pick linebackers in Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins, and I don't feel like we know a whole lot about Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins going on to a new coaching staff, and I think a lot of people are refreshed by the idea that new Cardinals head coach Jonathan Gannon and his DC, Nick Rollis, will utilize them correctly, and maybe they can get something close to that first-round grade that the Cardinals kind of tabbed them with.
So how do you think that Isaiah Simmons should be used? Because my thought has kind of been like he doesn't really fit the man system. He's not great in man coverage, and that just kind of makes it tough for Vance Joseph to put him on the field. Yeah,
no, it is tough. But you go out there and you say, hey, he's an inside linebacker, and then you see him primarily play in the slot corner. It's like, well, yeah, of course he's going to be overmatched by the wide receiver threes of the world, and Travis Kelce, like he does to a lot of people, is going to dominate him. But then he's sent to the bench for the next 2 games, and he sees 30 combined snaps over 2 contests. I think that's just not enough. But hey, as far as the Broncos are concerned, no first-round pick, so you're not going to have the frustration of Vance Joseph not playing potential first-round pick. But you just didn't see the development there. I mean, I'm really hard-pressed to think of players that Vance Joseph, during his tenure here, developed. Like there are 2 guys that are free agents that could make their way to the Broncos via, Byron Murphy, a guy who ended last season with a back injury, and Zach Allen, who in probably his most healthy season was solid. He looked like kind of a baby J.J. Watt swatting balls down at the line and getting to the quarterback and being disruptive. But I really can't think of somebody. I'm not going to give him credit for Budda Baker because he was there and developing and on the rise before VJ got there.
Yeah, very good points, Bo, and certainly some guys that Vance might bring over. And Broncos, this may be the most negative hire that I've seen the Broncos make at head coach, at coordinator, in my time covering the team since 2016. The fan base, for the most part, is very split, and I think that's even being fair to Vance. But when he was the defensive coordinator of the Cardinals, he had 2 seasons in which the Cardinals ranked 11th in points per game and 12th in points per game. Of course, also 2 bottom 5 finishes, including last year where they were the 2nd worst defense in the NFL. But to bring some positivity or some positive spin to this, what did he do well in those 2 years when they were a top 3rd defense?
He did a lot of great things as far as slowing down elite, top-flight wide receivers. I think if you looked at Cooper Kupp's performances against the Cardinals, it was Cooper Kupp light. Like when he went on to win the Triple Crown in receiving, and when he played, the few games that he played this season, the Arizona Cardinals were able to bottle up Cooper Kupp, relative to what we're used to seeing recently from Cooper Kupp, shutting down guys like DK Metcalf. So Vance Joseph has a great plan as far as putting his cornerbacks, his defensive secondary in good position to take away the opposing team's top flight wide receiver. That's great. He also has the respect of all the players in that locker room. That's why you saw when Cliff Kingsbury was fired on Black Monday this season, that the players said, hey, let's look internally. Let's promote Vance Joseph, because they had so much respect for him and how he kind of commanded that. But he was probably the only adult as far as the coaching staff went, in recent history. So they just looked to him as the most respectable figure remaining. But also, I think that he did a great job. If you look at the tape from the season opener in 2021 against Tennessee, and the way he was able to get Chandler Jones in suitable matchups, favorable matchups, where he could rack up 5 sacks, he was just an absolute man possessed. Vance Joseph was moving him around, utilizing the rest of the defensive line and putting Chandler Jones in great favorable matchups. So I think he does pretty well with that. I used to think he was a guy that would kind of dial up some exotic blitzes and stuff like that, but that's kind of gone away. He's gotten a little bit more, he's gotten less aggressive. And I think that was unfortunate, because I think that was one of his strengths maybe 2 seasons ago, but I haven't seen much of that recently from VJ.
So it seemed like the final 3 candidates in Denver were Rex Ryan, Matt Patricia, and Vance Joseph. Obviously, Vance well, and you know those other guys a little bit because everybody does. How would you have ranked them if you were making the hire?
It's a dub. I mean, compared to that crew, I think that, and I said that recently on one of our podcasts in PHNX Cardinals, and when you're looking at who the finalists were, absolutely, Vance Joseph is the guy. I think that he is a good defensive coordinator. I won't shy off for that, and that's not too polarizing of a take. I think, relative to the offense here in Arizona, I think that you would say that his defensive group, his unit, played a lot better than the offensive side of the football. But at the same token, like you guys mentioned, the stats are there. The results are there. Gave up, the second most points in the league. But then the previous season, they're in top 10 in defensive DVOA. It was a little uneven performance. I just don't think he ever took this defense and elevated it to the point where it was a strength for this team. And, when you're coming off a 4-13 team, people want to see heads roll. And I don't think that there was any future for VJ left in the desert. I think he became far too polarizing, almost a parody, after everything started to kind of fall apart here. So, people are, celebrating. But at the same token, he was, when you watch Hard Knocks, you almost felt like Vance Joseph was the head coach of that team. Like he was the guy that was in control, where everybody else was just kind of on cruise control.
Kind of along those lines, Henry asking you, who would you choose between those 3? Henry and I disagree. Henry thinks that Vance is potentially an above-average defensive coordinator to average. I think he's average to below average. Where would you say he is as a defensive coordinator?
Yeah, that's a great question. His ceiling, to say above average, I think that he can produce above average performances. But when you look at the season as a whole, I think that you would you couldn't get that average, that median, to above average. It would be, you would mostly kind of top out at average. So I would agree with you on that. And I think that that's the issue. I would like to kind of see what he's going to do with maybe some top flight talent. I'm interested to see how he continues to develop PS2. And I hope that I'm not going to go in the camp that says he's going to stunt his growth, because I don't think he does that. And he's already going into his 3rd season. But, I just don't know what he looks like, or I do know, unfortunately, too well what he looks like when he's gifted very talented draft prospects, and we've seen them fall at the wayside far too often.
When the Cardinals were getting beat defensively last year, what was going wrong?
Yeah, it was coverage off. They couldn't cover at all. J.J. Watt, Zach Allen were being very disruptive, winning at the line of scrimmage, getting into the backfield, making opposing quarterbacks uncomfortable. And even without any edge rush at all from their outside linebackers, their cover corners couldn't cover at all. And that was a big issue. And Vance Joseph knew that. And that might have taken away his aggressiveness that I talked about earlier. But it was a big-time issue, especially on third downs. They couldn't get off the field. The red zone was a big issue. And then, you can't really find any rhyme or reason, but it felt like any time the Cardinals did play, the few times they played complimentary football, when the offense got a score or put themselves in a position to get back in the game, you always felt like, oh, man, here comes a letdown from VJ's defense. And it happened a lot. And that was unfortunate. Like, opposing offenses were able to string together these back-breaking drives, and it just crushed the Cardinals, and it just didn't help. But it was, but like I said, you look at the offense versus the defense, you have to go in favor of VJ's defense, but that's grading on a curve.
I think it's great insight, Bo. Thank you so much for joining. I mean, you're as busy as us out there in Arizona. Thanks so much for taking some time. And I just have one more thing to say for you on the way out. Pew, 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 shots. Enjoy the Jonathan
Are you going at
Gannon
my guy
era.
JG?
Oh man, that was something. What'd you think of it?
I can't believe Jonathan Gannon, for having enthusiasm for his new job and meeting his new players, that he gets crushed in the media because he's pumped to be there. Zach, you of all people should know about this. Like, when you come and you bring the energy and then people are turned off by it, it's not your problem. It's not Jonathan Gannon's problem. It's the people that can't match that. And you know what? They just did their defensive coordinator introductory press conference yesterday, and Gannon came in with energy unlike I've ever seen. He came in and he goes, hey, 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 and he's rallying the media members up, getting them pumped up about it. So I'm all on board for it, especially because the previous regime was so, like, way too cool for the room. And then to kind of get the polar opposite of that, I think it's refreshing. I think it's what the Cardinals need. But he's also, he's got an edge to him. He's got kind of a hard-ass edge to him. I've equated it to kind of like he's a fun, cheap first date. Things are going really well. You had low expectations, but man, you're having the time of your life, and might turn into something serious.
I love it, and I'm pulling for you guys and for Jonathan Gannon. It reminds me a lot of Nathaniel Hackett last year, not in a bad way. First Nathaniel Hackett, brought so much energy, so much positivity, and everyone wanted to see him succeed because a lot of times, you mentioned it, the coaches in the NFL are too cool for fans, are too cool for media members, are too cool for it. They're bigger than it, and it's really cool when someone comes in with energy and just a different type. I really wish that Nathaniel Hackett would have worked out here, and so I'm pulling for Jonathan again. I had to bring it up, Bo.
Of course, no, it's fun, man. I mean, it like we always say, at least it's interesting, and we're talking about it, you guys are talking about it, and the Arizona Cardinals after horrible season. It's it's not the worst problem to have that people are poking fun of how enthusiastic your head coach is.
No, it's not at all, and enjoy that down there. Thanks so much for your time, Bo. We'll talk to you soon. We'll see you next week, actually.
See you next week.
See you, Bo.